Hold on, guys. I'm really sorry. Give me 1 second.
It's okay.
Still setting up the show, getting the link ready for Twitter.
I thought that was a sound effect, a new sound effect for the.
Oh yeah, we got that.
Yeah.
Woo! Getting the chat ready. There we
If
go.
someone asks an awkward question, then you can do the door knock, and we can go. Oh, sorry, I got to go get the.
Only I think that's fun. But there's all the sound effects played at once. All right. So they say that apparently the Trump conference is still on, but we're going up against it. So there it is. I just shared all the links. Welcome to our viewers on YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. Welcome to the YouTube chat. Give us a thumbs up and a share. We're going to go ahead and start the show now. Here we go. The Bitcoin Group, the American original. For over the last 10 seconds, the sharpest Satoshis, the best Bitcoins, the hardest cryptocurrency talk. We'd like to welcome our panelists, Ben Ark from BTC IoT.
Hello.
Robert Allen from Bitcoin and Friends.
How's everyone doing?
Dan Eve, the Crypto Raptor.
COVID-19. Oh, you know what I mean.
Will never get out of my head. And I'm Thomas Hunt from the World Crypto Network. Moving on to our top story this week. The price of Bitcoin currently is up 11%, with a last of 5,415, a high of 6,010, and a low of 3,956. That's $1 for 18,273 Satoshis. As you can see, the price of Bitcoin tumbled, dropping 50% in an epic 2-day drop, following the stock market down. Many people who believe Bitcoin was a store of value and survives against the stock market were let down as Bitcoin did not store its value, did not survive as a state of refuge. Ben, what are your thoughts on the Bitcoin price decline, the stock market decline, and pretty much it's all related to the coronavirus, which we'll talk about more in the second issue. But what do you think? 50% down.
I mean, these are strange and incredible times, and very risky and unstable times. And wealth in an unstable environment just looks for stability, and Bitcoin isn't really that stable. That being said, I would say that a lot of the selling action, it was done on exchanges. It was weaker hands. If you go on local, I was looking at local Bitcoin prices, and quite often they were selling at a premium. So a lot of the hodler Bedrock, they were holding strong, and it was and there wasn't that much liquidity in P2P markets. As I was told, BISC was similar as well. It was more on the exchanges where the price was being dumped down. So weak hands, it's supply and demand. You know, there's not enough people buying, and there's a hell of a lot of people rushing to the door to try and sell as they're capitulating. But they're trader types, and they just see Bitcoin as a risky asset, like some risky share or option or whatever else. So they just want to dump that and convert to cash. I think there has also been, on top of that, some people who live off Bitcoin, and they've maybe sold a Bitcoin or two just to give themselves some cash in the bank during these weird and strange days which we're living through. So, but no, it very much felt like this isn't trading advice, and please nobody put any money on my opinions, but it did feel like a dip. Like it was hitting, going down, dropping 50% in a couple of days is quite extreme. And it doesn't mean that the value of Bitcoin has dropped 50% in a couple of days. It's just a short and sharp buy the dip moment. And as we can see, the price has gone back up. And I'm sure that people will remember why Bitcoin is there, and it's there as a negatively correlated against other assets and stock markets. It's a separate class of its own. And we have got as well. So we have also got all these people who are going to be quarantined, and they're going to be sat at home on the laptops. And it's all going to coincide with the halvening event. So people will be learning about the halvening event. They'll be on the laptops. They'll see Bitcoin price which crashed, and they read that the price has crashed in the paper or whatever, and then a few months later the price is going to go potty because of the halving. So it feels very temporary, and it's a panic capitulation from weak hands. But the hodler bedrock's still pretty strong, so not too much to worry about. Just it's always scary when the price drops so hard. But
Robert Allen, is Bitcoin still a safe haven asset?
I guess it depends on your time preference or your, the window of time that you're viewing your investment in. For many of us, if you were buying when it was a few $100s, it's still looking pretty good at 5,000. So of course, if you were buying in at a much higher price, which some people did, it's a little painful to see that happen to your investment. I would just encourage people to remember to think long-term with Bitcoin. Nothing fundamentally has changed about Bitcoin. It still is producing blocks roughly every 10 minutes, maybe a little closer to 9.5 as the hash rate increases. It still works. I used it last night to send a little bit of Bitcoin to an exchange, and I bought a leveraged position, which I never do. But I thought, you know what are the odds that it's going to drop more after dropping the second most in its entire history? And I bought pretty close, not quite the bottom. I wish I'd gotten the money on the exchange a little quicker, but I bought a leveraged position. I slept overnight with with a leveraged position open. Woke up in the morning, thinking, well, there's a chance I won't have any money there, and thankfully it was up. So far so good. Not advising people to do that, but maybe if you're a veteran and you've got brass balls, you can try it. But yeah, I mean, Bitcoin is still doing what it does. It's going to be here moving forward. There's huge amounts of money that's gone into investment in Lightning Network companies and other Bitcoin companies. This industry is not just going to die because the price dropped a bit. And people were liquidating their positions because maybe they were over leveraged in equities or in Bitcoin, and they needed cash to cover. This is, to me, pretty normal when we live in an economy that is addicted to easy money, and it just sloshes around a lot. And this is sort of one of the repercussions of this kind of sick financial system that we are all stuck in. So coronavirus. Well, I mean, in the end, maybe this is going to be like the pin that pricks all of this nonsense, and it all unravels, and it could be pretty painful for a couple of years here. But let's hang together. Let's keep building the future. I'm honestly very optimistic, and we're going to make it.
That's just what Ben Franklin said. We must all hang together, or surely we will all hang separately. Dan Eve, do you sleep in Bitcoin, fiat, or perhaps with two fuzzy dogs?
I sleep. I don't sleep, and two tremendously fuzzy dogs. But one thing that isn't really worrying is that the hash rate at the moment is like 124 exahashes, I think, at the moment. So it really is still smashing it. I mean, it peaked at like 140, just under 140. So the dip, I mean, it hasn't had much time to have a good ripple effect yet and see whether it is really going to, impact on the hash rate. But at the moment, it's kind of, wobbling in its average. We'll see what that kind of how that pans out once on the lead up to the halving. But especially if there's any more big global economic kind of freakouts again, which wouldn't surprise me at all, because obviously the level of people freaking out in different countries varies a lot. In the UK at the moment, like Boris basically said, it was kind of blunt, but kind of told it kind of a bit cold, which was like, you might lose loved ones, etc. And which is very sad. And I think that's going to definitely have ripples throughout the supply chain of everything, including probably mining hardware. So you might even see older hardware kind of come back into play if there's shortages or whatever, and however the price pans out. But it's very scary times. I was really not happy to look at CoinMarketCap. Like I was in despair. But if also not in despair, as in like, the classic, like this is, it shit the bed. but also it's just hilarious. It's just, come on, it's just funny. The fact that someone mentioned earlier, sorry to waffle on, about the circuit breakers of on the stock market. They're all over the show at the moment, and Bitcoin kind of doesn't have any circuit breakers, although technically I suppose BitMEX served as kind of a bit of a circuit breaker. Everyone freaked out and maybe was a bit paused trading in their thoughts at least for a little bit. But it's recovered, a little bit since the massive crash, and that just shows how kind of resilient it is. But yeah, we'll wait and see. I'm still in shit your pants zone, and there's no toilet roll in the UK. Jeez.
No toilet paper in the UK. Moving on to the exit question. The price of Bitcoin, 2 parts. The price of Bitcoin this time next week, higher and lower. And is this a short-term or a long-term crisis? Ben from Wales.
Yeah, I think higher. I think higher. I mean, yeah, I'm going to go higher.
Robert Allen.
Sorry, the question is the price going up or down? Is that what you asked?
Higher or lower?
Always higher for Bitcoin.
Always higher. Dan Eve, Crypto Raptor.
I love that enthusiasm, and I'm going to go higher as well because I
Always higher.
was really wrong. But
we'll stick with always higher, except I'm afraid that it might follow the market lower. Everyone thinks the crisis is over, but sadly, I'm afraid the crisis has just begun. Welcome to the 40 viewers in our YouTube chat. Be sure to give us a thumbs up. It's free, and it's how YouTube recommends videos to other people. So the more thumbs up we get, the more people will get recommended to, the more people will watch, and the more people will give us thumbs up, and then so on and so forth. By the way, did you know?
We'll go viral.
We'll go viral, totally viral. And the World Crypto Network has its own audio podcast on iTunes and wherever else podcasts are listened to. Listen to the latest interviews from HCPP and the Lightning Conference on the World Crypto Network audio podcast. Moving on to issue 2, coronavirus. The coronavirus continues to spread in the United States this week, with many people now giving up on stopping the spread of the virus and working instead on flattening the curve. The idea of flattening the curve is that we can self-quarantine, avoid public places and public gatherings, and get sick slowly rather than getting sick quickly. As you can see from the chart on your screen, if we get sick quickly, we'll quickly overwhelm the healthcare system. There'll be no beds, there'll be no nurses, there'll be no medicine. So if we get sick slowly, the medical system can adapt and we can survive and we can have less damage from this spread. Meanwhile, President Trump has finally declared a national emergency, finally unlocking $40 billion in aid, and testing is beginning, although it does seem like the National Basketball League is really running things. Once they canceled their season, the rest of the sporting leagues fell behind them. Schools began to be canceled, and we started to take this thing seriously. Much like the NFL, who is running our drug treatment program here in the United States, recently switching over from drug penalties to drug treatment, the National Basketball League is the default and leader of the United States. Let's go to Dan Eve. What do you think so far about the coronavirus, the world response? How are things in the UK? I hear Boris is taking it very seriously, but still feverishly working on the trade deal. But we'll just talk general coronavirus. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people are freaking out massively. There's points where you kind of, you go out for a drive and you see that like people's faces are almost fearful, especially as other people walk past. But maybe that's just, life in a city anyway. But I don't know. I think that, bog roll is definitely out of stock at my local shop of co-op, which means obviously it's really starting to hit home now about how much people are panicking. And although like the Prime Minister is like really, really blasé about things, I think it did shock a lot of people how kind of how blunt he came up with. We're going to lose sort of loved ones, and it's really it's an obvious thing to say, and you think why can't I say that? But it sounds like they've looked at the evidence, the data, and they've come up with a plan that they don't want to kind of go full whack now, and maybe the timing will be better on. Now, at the end of the day, we can critique it, but the way I think of it is like, if I trust a plane going up in the sky, and I know that, not appeal to authority, but, specifically, but, obviously there's a big collective of people having a good thought process about this. We've got a lot of data on how it's proliferated and spread in other countries. And so, maybe the approach, it does sound a bit balmy, but maybe this will work, of just kind of pretty much continuing. But yeah, I don't know. It's early, it's scary times at the end of the day. Yeah, very, very scary.
Ben from Wales.
Yeah, I kind of have the opposite opinion. I don't trust anything Boris says. The UK government are very much guilty of just behaviour parenting. They're trying to do what technocrats do, and they're looking at the people, and they don't want to give them all the information. They wanted them to carry on, go to football games, go to Cheltenham. Don't panic just now. We want you to panic, in a few weeks' time, and when you panic in a few weeks' time, that's when we'll quarantine you. Whereas the data all points towards, obviously, and it is common sense for a reason. If we quarantine now, and if we take severe measures now, then it's going to have a much better effect at curbing the amount of people who are infected. It's just the exponential nature of this sort of virus spreading. I'm quite worried about the UK, because you look at, so if you watch some of the European. The EU came up with did a talk there earlier today, and it was on the measures they were going to be taking, and there was lots of closures of public spaces and schools and other places and large meetings of people to try and bring that curve down. Whereas it kind of feels with Boris that since it's been classed as a pandemic, it's almost like they can just give up. Yeah, everyone's going to get it, so we're just going to give up. I can't help feeling the UK might head the sort of same way as Italy, unless it shapes up a little bit and starts taking it more seriously, and start taking more appropriate measures to curbing the spread of the virus. You mentioned in the US you've got $40 billion in aid, which Trump's putting towards the coronavirus, but they're pumping $500 billion. The Fed's pumping $500 billion into the US stock market pretty much every other day throughout April. So to put that into context, the entire US military budget is $600 billion. So it's a hell of a lot of money which is getting pumped into to keep that stock market up, to make Trump look good.
I've read a series of articles recently where they're talking about the coronavirus response as a failure of society, that we have a right to expect better from our society, especially a rich society, an organized society like the United States or the United Kingdom. We've heard things like in the United States, they fired the preventative team. They got rid of the other team. All the people who would try to predict this while it's not happening were all let go. Shouldn't we expect more from our government? Instead, we're seeing what you say. Boris is kind of wringing his hands, saying people are going to die. Trump seems in denial and perhaps infected with the virus himself.
Yeah, I mean,
and coughing during.
It's not all governments. If you look at so my new coin market cap is coronavirus numbers. I don't remember the name of the website, but it's the website which has all the stats for how many people have died in each country and how many people are infected, and it's updated daily. And like the Germans, for example.
Info.
Pardon?
Worldmeters.info.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that's the one. I'm checking it out every few hours. And if you look at the Germans, I think maybe it's Scandinavia as well, that they've got high infection rate, much higher than the UK, but they've got low death rates. And a lot of that's due to their sort of very pragmatic and candid approach to testing, and also taking sort of firmer measures quicker than we have been taking. I mean, I think this whole scenario highlights that as a society, as human beings on the planet, sometimes we have big problems which we need to solve, and it's not a case of free markets will just solve those problems, for example. I've been arguing for a long time, for years, with people within the Bitcoin space who always attack Keynesian economics and said that no, in certain circumstances, such as during the Great Depression, for example, governments are not going to stand by and let businesses fail, let people lose their jobs, let food production slump to the point where maybe there isn't enough food for people to eat. They're going to prop up businesses, they're going to prop up industry, they're going to keep the economics rolling because they need to in order for people not to go hungry. And it's like, okay, in this ideal world, maybe let all these businesses fail and then we'll have like better markets. But to argue that all those businesses out there who didn't budget in a pandemic of some virus which is going to kill millions of people potentially. So to say that they're, you know, that they're businesses which deserve to fail because they weren't, you know, together enough to predict this thing and within the free market, it's bollocks. Like, you know, that we just need to kind of keep our economies as safe and stable as we can. We need to look after each other, and we need to all pitch together, wartime effort, and try and just fight this virus. And that hopefully, you know, when we get through, the survivors of 2020, they'll almost be like the survivors of World War II. They would have experienced collectively something really quite tragic and horrible, and they'd all suffered losses. But they'll come together and say, look, there's some problems which we need to solve, which we can't do individually. And if we try and do it individually, we're just going to fuck it up. And then hopefully there'll be much more peace-loving people, because it has felt like the world has got a bit more aggressive over the past few years. But no, it's absolutely terrifying. The coronavirus is really, really very serious. Italy, for example, the Lombardy region, a lot of people look at the Italians and they think, oh, you know, it's Italy, or, you know, ooh. But actually Lombardy in Europe's got one of the best healthcare. Milan's got one of the best. It's one of the richest parts of Europe. It's got some of the best equipped hospitals in the entire of Europe, and they're completely overwhelmed. And lots of people are suffering. Lots of people are dying. Severe measures need to be taken now, and bailing out certain industries in order to keep, you know, food available for people is absolutely fine. So yeah, I think it's very much time for a lot of Bitcoiners to look themselves in the mirror and say, because there's a lot of doom porn craving Bitcoiners who've wanted a catastrophe to happen so Bitcoin's price can go up, whatever else, and we can have citadels. I think it's time they look in the mirror and they say, look, like, is my politics, does it really make sense in this large modern world? And aren't there some other solutions, you know, within other fields of economics, such as Keynesian economics, and making sure people, you know, economies are able to continue to move, even if it does involve, you know, doing things like printing money, for example. So yeah, it's wild and crazy times, but it's very, very scary, very scary. Look after yourself. It's all about the name of the game right now is immune system building. Just go for jogs. Obviously, don't contact many people when you go for your jog, but eat healthy food. Like, just build the immune system. That's all which matters. Us Bitcoiners, you know, Bitcoiners, they need to look after their beautiful bodies, because we've got very important work to do over the next few years.
Is it too soon? Sorry, just very quickly. It just rolled off the top of my head, as it were, when you said the coin market cap of, like, I just thought COVID morgue cap. Too soon?
What's that again?
COVID morgue cap.
COVID morgue cap. Oh,
yeah, savage.
I don't know if it's. Obviously, someone's going to come up with that. There's already a Corona coin, isn't there? Here.
There's a Corona coin came out, I think, years ago. But there's so many of those stat sites, and I think if you look at like I tweeted earlier, because I was looking through the list on that Corona the Corona stats page, and if you look through the list, it gives all, like, the really specific details of where people have actually been. So it says, you know, it doesn't give their name, but you could probably guess it. Like, you know, gave the example, the Google employee in Bangalore went on holiday for you know, and so they're very specific. And if you look in, I think it's Singapore, they've got like a Facebook of the virus, so you can actually see where things have been, where people have been, and try and avoid it as much as possible.
Like the heroic lawyer in New York City who spread it to more than 50 people. They have like little awards and little like stars for how well you spread it, and how many people.
I mean, the one good thing we have got in our favor is that the data collection we're doing now is absolutely phenomenal, and the way in which countries are working together to share data is brilliant.
They say China is now getting track on all their people. They're getting all the tests, all the medical records. They're going into whole new areas that they weren't into previously. But I agree with Ben. I agree with what he was saying, that the let's see, spotlight video, that the market didn't respond. A lot of people, they were hoping, they had this dream that, why didn't the labs jump on this? Why didn't people say, hey, there's a chance to make money on the virus. If we get the test kits ready, we'll be the ones who make the money. There wasn't anyone. No one took that risk. No one jumped on the virus. There are some problems that the market can't solve. And this is a big earth-shattering thing. The libertarians, their minds getting mad. Everyone's getting upset. Turn this off, thumbs down, whatever. But that's what we've come up against here. There are large problems such as war, economic catastrophe, environmental catastrophe, nuclear plant explodes, all these things where we do have to work together. And that's where universal health care is going to come into this. We're going to talk about Medicaid for all again in the United States. We're going to talk about universal basic income. We're going to talk about giving money directly to the people to try to get them through this, because gig workers, restaurant workers, retail workers, all the normal people that bring our society together are all out of work right now, and none of them get paid just for staying home. You can't work a ticket line from home. You can't work a cashier from home. This is not a solution. Their payroll tax cut doesn't help them. We need actual direct aid. And that's, again, going to break
But
everyone. I mean, we're FDR territory again, right? I mean,
employment law and trade unions are what made America great. That's what gave people decent enough incomes, and so they could be sort of socially mobile, and they could send their kids to college. You look at the comparison of wages, real world wages people were living on in the sort of 50s, 60s. It was a phenomenal amount of money. Regular normal blue collar work would be on the equivalent, say, 100 grand now as a salary. So, and that was all. There's nothing wrong with
one person could work too. You could have a family where one person worked, one person stayed home, had the option, the choice. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong in that. I mean, like, obviously, I'm BTC socialist, blah blah blah, but call me fuck. But I mean, like, there's nothing wrong in thinking that sometimes you have to fight for your right as an employee to have certain things in place, such as, like, if you're sick, you get paid. This gig economy bollocks, that needs to just get rid of that.
The gig economy does.
Let me interject on the virus a little bit here.
Go ahead.
So I mean, this may sound a little cold, but there are a lot of people that, how to put this simply, like, Bitcoin is beautiful because it's anti-fragile, right? And this is a benefit to the technology. And I think maybe humanity is just in need of a big virus to just call the herd a little bit, remove some faulty genes from the population. My feeling is, look, if you're 70 or 80, you've lived a good long life. My parents are in their 70s. I definitely don't want them to die, but I also know that it's a possibility. So, of course, I've encouraged them to try to avoid public places and be careful and, be healthy. But at the end of the day, like, we're all going to die from something eventually. In the US, you have a flu that goes around every season, and 60,000 people die from that, and life goes on. I understand this is a little more serious, or at least that's what we're told, but I don't know. To me, I just kind of feel like I think you could have no government involved, and maybe there would be a few more deaths up front, but in the end, maybe we would all benefit as a species.
Well, so, I think one thing, it's a good point. Like that Boris and co, the science crew, were trying to say is that build herd immunity. If people who had weak immune systems and were more likely to succumb held back a little, which is obviously bad, but it's kind of not just thinking about the economy, but it could work out better for the overall population to kind of have it in that staged way. And when you think about it, some of the points they brought up, one of the things I thought was quite a good point was the fact that if they shut off all the schools, all of the people would, people that have got kids the kid would normally in school, they might then have to give them to the grandparents, and that's even more of a risk because then you've got super spreaders that are going to the grandparents. So I think there's a lot of other kind of intangible benefits. There's tangible and intangible benefits to both, and I think that it's going to be very difficult to call whether this was a good decision to make. But the one thing that kind of reassured me was the fact that, and I know people with the chemtrails, for example, people can chemtrails up in the air and they're killing everyone. And I'm like, but surely the people that are doing it, they're killing their own family, they're killing everyone, blah blah blah. And the argument, those scientists, and because there were loads of people heckling like the appeal to authority of like the scientists, but at the same time, we've got to be rational. They've got facts and figures that we don't ultimately. And the fact is that they are all, it's so close to people now, where Trump's shook hands with someone or had a photo of someone, and the English health minister has got it now. It's not like it's out of their reach, out of the reach of the rich people. This is like in your face. Everyone could possibly have it. So the decisions I think they make, it was slightly reassuring, whilst a lot of people were freaking out, was thinking, well, they all know, like, that what the decisions they make are going to affect everyone around them, their family. It's not like something you can hide away from very well, obviously, apart from isolation. So yeah, it may be for the greater good. It's just a very emotional thing to drag people through. And I'm sat thinking of my gran that I saw recently, and and that concerns me. My parents, for example, we were going to meet today, but we held it off, because I'd feel awful if they came over to see my son and then he gave it to them. So yes, it's there's going to be some difficult times, definitely. And
it's
I think,
really not. I mean, it's not for the greater good. I mean, if you argue that point, then you would manufacture a virus and every year just release it and then kill off anyone who's slightly weak, and then just have like a superior race. And then you're going down a thought trail which some people have gone down in the past. And
I'm not saying like I agree. I'm saying I think
you
personally,
start talking about herd genetics.
Yeah, I think that it's
we're talking about horses here. We're not talking about people. Men and people, like all these people, we're above this. We influence the food chain. We build the spaceships. We build the rockets. Like, we're not going to just let a third of the people die because we couldn't fill out the forms in time, or we couldn't make the test fast enough, or we couldn't have the forms for the drive-through things set up. I mean, we're supposed to be organized. We're supposed to be above this. Like, we have this incredible capacity for war.
Well, hold on. It's not a third of the people, right? It's 2% is, I think, what I've heard is like the worst case scenario for the death.
No, I mean, if you go on that website with the statistics, and you'll see that I think it's the death toll is, I think it's 6% now, and we're at 140,000 total cases. So I mean, maybe you could argue that there's some people who don't display. There's going to be a certain amount who don't actually display any symptoms. It's a large number.
A lot of them weren't living in the first place. If you aren't really fully living your truest and best life, then maybe you don't deserve it, right?
I mean, another good point is as well that so far it's only hit developed economy. I mean, it hit China, and they've got pretty good. They're organized and they can build hospitals in a couple of weeks, so they could deal with it, and they have. And then it's hit Milan, which has got like the richest, one of the best functioning health services in the entire of Europe. But when it hits, sub-Saharan Africa and India, and
what if trying to smash down the curve is actually a negative because the virus is able to mutate or something? Is it? I mean, I guess this is my position in general, is that governments try to help, and they almost always, like 99.9%, don't really do what they're trying to do. They don't actually affect the help that they're claiming to deliver, and in the end, they enrich their friends, their buddies. And I mean, this is a perfect example of that. Like, if the people in charge really were wanting to, quote, help everyone, then maybe they would do like a helicopter money thing and give everyone $1,000. They'll never do that. I can't imagine that ever happening. And if it does, it's ultimately not a smart move anyway, for a lot of other reasons, in my opinion. But no, it'll never happen.
Well, that is the big difference, and we want to look at this as a worldwide issue. In China, they have the very strong government. They were able to quarantine, to lock down, to control their population. In Italy, you might say they have a very kind government, because exactly what Robert said will never happen in the US, and I pretty much agree. They recently waived mortgages, they waived bills, they waived credit cards. They help the actual people who are affected by this. Now, today, Trump has, I think in the speech, he said he was waiving interest on student loans. So that's something that's a part of this. They've talked about payroll taxes, but again, that's always kind of been the next tax they wanted up. They're just going off their list of what they would like. Actually giving out the money, actually doing UBI, actually dropping the money. I even heard, I was shocked to hear it on CNBC today, a guy from the American Enterprise Institute, a very conservative group, said exactly what I said. He said, you don't need a new program. We don't need a new government thing that says, oh, are you wealthy? Are you, do you meet the qualifications? We have to do all these tests. You just fire up the check printing machines. We have these fantastic check printing machines we use for tax refunds. We have this great database with everybody's name and address in it. And I don't care what the amount is, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. What we need to do, and again, this is going to horrify everyone, but I heard about this. The general idea here, a friend of mine told me about this Facebook post, and I'm sure it's kind of some hippie thing, but basically what they said is, when I watch CNBC, when we think about America, we think about capitalism and the big engine of money that we've built, and what, we build all these widgets and all these things. We need to put that on pause for maybe a month or two. And this is horrifying, and stop the world and all these things. But if we could put that on pause, we could put the money making idea, even the idea that you need to work from home. You just need to stay home. You need to stay home and not get sick, and if that means sleeping more and not stressing out and taking some immune drugs, take some vitamins, vitamin C, drink some orange juice, all these kind of things. That's what society actually needs, is a money-making working holiday. Just give the people $5,000, give the people $10,000, say, hey, it's America month. Everybody's going to stay home, read some books, put out some websites, have some, tell people what to do. They even said, my brother said on CNBC that they said, here's the best TV shows to stream. This is a financial channel. This is not entertainment. They don't usually recommend Breaking Bad or Sopranos or whatever they ended up saying that you should stream. But what they're saying is staying home, doing nothing, not stressing out. That's actually the best for our society. That's against all of our capitalist ideas. All of our capitalist ideas are stay stressed out, work more, never take a vacation, no paid sick leave, no healthcare for everybody. We're not interconnected. But once again, as Dan was saying, it's starting to leak into the rich people. And as sad as it is, they need to be affected. Trump needs to be affected. His family needs to, experience sickness. And I don't want them to experience loss. That's not acceptable for anybody. But everybody's going to lose somebody in this. And the sooner you lose somebody, the more you know how serious it is. The sooner somebody gets sick, the more real it becomes for you. And a lot of people, this triple whammy of the no Europe travel, the NBA canceling all basketball games, which affects people who ignore politics, people who ignore world issues. They just watch basketball. It's no more basketball. Combined with Tom Hanks, the legendary actor, just everybody's friend getting sick, brought it home to everyone. They're like, wait a minute. If Tom Hanks can get it, he's a big fancy celebrity. If this basketball player can get it, he's a big fancy celebrity. I'm a normal guy. I'm going to get this thing. Trump's going to get it. His cousin, his sister, his daughter, all these people that work and interact with people and have to get food sometime. We're all going to get it. We're all.
It's going to have.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
It's going to have a huge impact on future society. So, I got a professor friend of mine who said that because they're sort of prepping so they can teach remotely, so that their students will be at home and they'll be completing work at home, doing research at home, and then they'll be sending lectures remotely. And then my professor friend swears that, because they think also this is going to last a fair few months, that it will show that so much education can just be had. You don't need to step into a university, for example. And a lot of education can just be accessed at home, and it will kind of prove that, like we have Open University and things in the UK which work on a similar principle, but it'll prove to the masses that it's very plausible and possible, and they think that it's going to have a massive rippling effect for the way in which people access education, higher education in the future. And I think probably the same for secondary education as well. So the impact this is going to have on society is going to be absolutely massive. And I think Thomas is right in thinking that actually it is capitalistic to think that rather than needlessly go out and work and all infect each other and die and not be able to access ICU units because there's not enough of them and blah blah blah, give ourselves a little holiday and then bring that curve down, and then so people can actually access medical treatment, so less people can die, and then more people can work, and this capitalist system works better. So I think it could be argued that it's not some sort of commie move. It's more of like a pragmatic. There's a bug in the system we need to clean out, or it's a wartime effort to fight some invader, which is the virus. So yeah, but it's going to have huge impact on future society for sure. And the way in which people work, a lot of people working remotely, like companies will realize that maybe employees don't need to come into work. Maybe they can just work at home, and it worked, during that time.
And you could see it already. I went to the store recently, and everyone was kind of standing away from each other. Everyone was afraid to touch each other. Everyone's afraid to be in the same area. That social anxiety that maybe only a few of us computer geeks or nerds had is now spreading to the rest of society. Robert, what do you think? Is this going to change society? What's the world going to be like? Or are we just going to forget this in 6 months? It was just a temporary thing.
I mean, I'll take the other side. Shit, sorry. I'll take the other side and say that I'm not positive of this, but there's a chance that this whole thing is a psyop cover for a market that was already going to crash anyway. So, you know, politicians get together and think, how can we divert everyone's attention away from the shit show that we've created here? Oh, we'll create this scary super virus thing. And who knows, maybe they even released it on purpose. Who fucking knows? I mean, the Chinese government obviously had a lot of people protesting in Hong Kong and other places. They'd have a very strong reason to come up with an excuse to go start dragging people out of buildings, throwing them into hospital beds, claiming that they're giving them a vaccine when they could have been murdering them. I just have so little trust and confidence in governments the world around that I honestly don't know what to think, but it's probably overblown and it's probably a psyop. And I'm really not that worried about it. And again, like, yes, people will die, but people always die for various reasons. Again, like I said, 60,000 Americans died last year from the flu. No one's freaking out about that and shutting down schools and all this shit. So I don't know. I don't know what to say for sure, but I'm not that worried about it, and life will go on. And also there's the economic, pain that's being inflicted that ultimately does result in life and death for people surviving. And so when you shut down an entire economy, that's going to have repercussions that maybe we're not factoring in here. So, you know, I don't know what to think really, but like I said, I'm just highly skeptical of the official narrative.
Well, I do agree with Robert. I was expecting the bear market. We have had a 10-year or a 20-year bull market in the United States. It just goes up and up and up. It's got to go down at some point. They're saying now that we're in the bear, we went 20% down. They're expecting a recession, partially caused by this virus, partially just caused by this 10-year cycle. But Robert mentioned conspiracy theory, so I want to go ahead and open it up. He's not officially a conspiracy theorist. I think that's a negative term, but I watched an interesting video recently where the guy basically drew a line from an American bioweapons facility that's shared with the Canadians and the British that's in Winnipeg. Perhaps the disease was stolen from there, taken to a Chinese facility in Wuhan. Then we have this question mark where the Chinese facility either accidentally gives it to this wet market where they serve bats and all kinds of other weird foods, or on purpose gives it to a wet market, or accidentally on purpose, or whatever, something like that. It leaks, it gets out. Then there's this whole kind of eugenics virus question for a long time. And I don't like to talk about this, but this is a true historical fact. People don't like people that don't look like them. And they've been trying to make viruses that kill people that don't look like them, but leave the other people okay.
I mean, this is we all know that it's possible to be able to develop a virus which could have this sort of effect on people, and you could target, I don't know, if you want to get rid of all the boomers so you can have more houses on the market so more people can. It's possible for all that to make a virus which targets a certain segment of the population. And then I'm sure that none of us truly trust our governments enough that they wouldn't at some point, some idiot who's in control like a Trump or whoever else, they're all idiots, might think that it's a good idea to release a virus in Wuhan's kind of like a Chicago in China. It's a industrial city. So if you want to sort of attack China, it's not a bad place to attack. So it's a plausible theory. This is the problem. Like, it's a conspiracy and it sounds a bit nutty. And the likelihood is it probably just crossed over from an animal, but it's plausible. Like, none of us would not put it past our governments to do such a thing. And we know that the technologies there are available. Again, that brings us back to that question that this is going to happen again. You know, this could be one of a whole batch of new viruses which storm through the human population and kill a lot of people.
And one thing I want to say, and I don't think it's political at all, but I don't think we need bioweapons programs. I don't think that we really needed the nuclear bomb, although, again, we got nuclear power out of that, so that's a twofer. But if you look at biological weapons, I don't think generally we get the same kind of spin-offs over making horrible diseases that we do out of other things. from a government, from a democracy perspective, I think we should have a vote. I think we should know how much we're spending, where we're spending it. I guess maybe not where, that's a tactical thing, but
yeah, but this,
we have to be able to say, like, scientists, don't work on this. Don't work on this project. Jurassic
yeah,
Park, get away.
They will, and governments will, and we. This is why society needs to change. If we're going to get to that Star Trek utopia where we haven't killed ourselves, then society will need to change. We'll need to look after. There's no other way around it. You need to look after each other. You can't be competing with each other, not trusting each other. It just won't work. You'll do things like drop horrible viruses in the middle of some industrial city to give yourself the edge.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So
completely. I mean, this is why I would argue that, to me, I would say I may be a minarchist, or, maybe someday in the future, if we have the technology to be truly anarchist as a globe, I would be in favor. But to get us there, I think the first step for humanity is that we decentralize and we break apart our large government structures, because these large governments are the ones that are creating the bioweapons and the nuclear weapons and so on. You don't have little rinky-dink countries creating bioweapons. You have the United States, you have China, and so on.
What about as viruses, they become like open source? So kind of, you would need some sort of organized force to counter things that, you got 3D printers now. People can like bioengineer stuff at home, tinkering in a futuristic lab, maybe. So maybe you need some sort of consensus based, I don't know, anti-bio warfare thing, or like renegade groups or something.
I think like it's kind of almost like, when we're working in some of the software and hardware stuff we work on, we're made aware of how easy it is to just fuck systems up. Like, I'm a hobbyist, I could go and break a lot of systems and I could steal quite a lot of money, and I know I'm capable of doing that. And I'm amazed that more people don't do those things. Like, I can make a device and I can go and I can kill Wi-Fi hotspots, and I can take out, camera systems, and there's a lot of black hat shit probably a lot of us could do if we wanted to, even if we just wanted to break stuff, but we don't. And those things do happen, but actually I'm amazed it doesn't happen more. And I think the reason it doesn't happen more is because fundamentally people are quite nice. So that's the thing I'm clinging on to, that people are quite nice. So hopefully, although yes, they will develop like a 3D printed gun, not everybody with a 3D printer is going to go and start 3D printing semi-automatics and mowing people down. So, and I think probably similar with like a free and open source biological warfare project, which is very plausible, very possible. I think people are fundamentally nice and they don't want to hurt each other. You go into a big city and you think, how is someone just statistically not going nuts now and like killing people? Like, there's so many people in this small space. Like, surely there's some nutter here who wants to kill someone, and there isn't. It's so. But yeah, no.
I think that's a really good point.
We just kill ourselves.
Yeah, I have confidence in the generally speaking that most humans are trying to do good. I think the problem I see is that governments operate with a different set of morality, and we as a society, many people at least, are okay with governments having a different set of morals than a normal person. And I think that's where a lot of these problems originate from. And so I don't know how we get to a point where people are able to recognize that, if it's wrong to steal as an individual, then it's wrong for a group of people to gather around someone else and take their money by force and call it taxation. So that's where, for me, I think a lot of these things, and this is where I differ probably from some that would be more on the socialist side of the spectrum, is I think we have to move from a place of first principles where we acknowledge that there is universal moral truth for all humans, and that we have to get to a point where we can agree on a few of these basic principles. And then if we could do that and then enforce those collectively, basically at that point, but just having some laws that we all follow, I think we could get to a point where governments are actually working for the benefit of people and protecting their rights. And I think that's where the United States, for a brief period, experimented and made some progress in that direction. But the country has become overrun now by I don't know if you want to call it an oligarchy or whatever term you want to use, kleptocracy, corporatocracy. But it's gone very far away from those ideals. And now we're all tax slaves in this country, or at least we're told that we are. And that's true the rest of the world around. And so I have no faith or confidence that that these large governments will ever work for the people, because it is in their interest to use the people as slaves effectively. And so that to me is like, we need a moral revolution of humans standing up and saying, you know what, if it's wrong to steal, it's wrong to steal. If it's wrong to murder, it's wrong to murder. It doesn't matter if you're wearing, a fancy outfit and you say that you're a general or whatever. It doesn't change the morality of the situation. So I don't know how we get to that point where people understand that, but that I believe is the only solution.
Well, I mean, I think you're right in, the anarchist. So, there's always a problem in conflating tax with socialism. It's like, yeah, okay, in order to have socialized control over or production or whatever else, then you can tax. Tax is a way in which you take money off everybody, and then you pull that money together and you have health service, you have education, you have roads, whatever else. But that's not per se socialism. That's just a tool which could be used to socialize control. There are other tools which could be used to socialize control, which is where the kind of anarchist thoughts came out of the that period in history, the Bakunins and whoever else. So I think anarchism probably is the answer. But not anarchism isn't not having rules. It's just sort of having rules on a kind of a more local, smaller basis. Which then, if you look at some of the anarcho-syndicalist flare-ups you've had, like in the Spanish Revolution and in Rojava and Syria. They're very successful at organizing themselves, but it's a bottom-up organization as opposed to top-down organization, and that's effective in a way where, like the Spanish Revolution, for example, with the biggest problem they had was when the commies and the fascists came in, they just annihilated them because they hadn't dedicated any of their resources to armaments and guns and an army. Because their society didn't need that, they didn't want that. They wanted to focus on looking after each other and schools and whatever else, and producing enough food for each other. But this is society will have to change. Like we can't expect that we haven't reached the end of history. Society will change and develop. We've got to get to that Star Trek utopia. But yeah, no, it's the argument I'll argue till I'm blue in the face that. To socialize control, to decentralize control is not giving all power to state or all power to state or government. If anything, it's eroding their power by the people being in control, and that's the actual kernel of definition for something like socialism and anarchism as well, which had a leftist tradition.
Yeah, and I think I would say as long as your vision is a world where people are voluntarily associating and voluntarily, providing value to other people and giving money. If you want to be a part of a communist, syndicate or whatever you want to call it, as long as people aren't, showing up at your door with a gun and demanding that you give something to their cause or their government or whatever, then that's fine. I think it just comes down to people voluntarily associating and voluntarily contributing. And my issue is when, because I see that as soon, like regardless of what your utopian vision is, as soon as you say that it's okay for one group or for even a collective of people to use the power of the government or the state or whatever you want to call it to go and deliberately take from others by force because they voted on it, that always devolves. Historically, it has always devolved into a murderous, terrible, tyrannical system. Yeah. And I don't see any examples otherwise. And so until someone can explain how you can, and again, this to me comes back to first principles, because if you have a coercive way of arranging society, then that coercion is going to ultimately, even if it starts out with noble intent, it's going to be used. Someone who's not someone who is a sociopath, right? Most people tend to be good, but there are some sociopaths, some people who truly are not wired in such a way that they can understand these things. And so they will take that control, they will use those guns, they will murder the opposition, and they will create a totalitarian government. And this has happened time and time again. And so that's where I get really worried by people who think that socialism is a good approach to anything, because
Oh no, it very much what you're talking
evolved.
about there is Leninism and Stalinism. So Lenin thought that he could use the state to get production, and then eventually they would work towards this socialist ideal. But that's Leninism. It's not socialism. Lenin.
Well, so how does socialism avoid this problem of governments taking the power from the rest of the people because they have the control, they have the guns, and they pass laws and they overrule? So on.
Marx had a tendency towards establishment and having establishment organizing stuff. And Bakunin argued with him. Mikhail Bakunin argued with him. He was a socialist also, but then a very prominent anarchist. He said that that train of thought and that way of trying to organize society will only ever end up with dictatorship. You won't have your socialist utopia. And lo and behold, that's what happened with Lenin. And then Stalin took the reins. And the first thing Lenin did is they went and they killed all the trade unionists, and they did all the things which were completely against kind of the idea of building a socialist utopia. And then they called that socialism, and then other countries modeled themselves off it, and then it played into but if you look traditionally at socialism, what socialism is, socialize and control. And that approach, like you say, is awful. And there have been thinkers and philosophers who've recognized that way back when, and still recognize it now as being a terrible approach to trying to socialize control. Anyway, which I don't want to co-opt this entire show.
So that's why socialism has never worked, but you haven't explained a system.
I would argue socialism has worked. So I live in a health system. I was born in the NHS. My kids go to a state-funded school. I have roads which I can drive up and down. Our entire capitalist system is works within a framework of a sort of state socialist approach. So
can't you be denied care though? Like, I mean, if they decide that it's not worth putting you in the hospital for whatever reason, or you could be waiting in lines. I mean, I don't think these systems are panacea. They don't work well, and they're breaking down, from my understanding, Canada and other places. Because you don't have market price signals
when you go to the hospital.
Look at the best healthcare systems in the world statistically, and they're consistently state-funded healthcare systems. Even Switzerland.
I mean, even if the systems did work, my argument would just basically be that your country has benefited from centuries of capitalism, where you had pricing mechanisms in place, and that if you remove those, the system will eventually grind to a halt and break. And this
is the problem with the centralized pricing, centralized control. This the Stalinist approach. It's
right,
awful.
right, but that
against that.
Yeah, but that's exactly what's happening though in a quote. So even a modern socialist country
so if you have
it's the same thing.
If you had a free market, say if you had active working cooperatives, they could operate within a free market. Hopefully outcompete the capitalist models, in my opinion. And that's the way in which.
So you just mean a different business structure. You're basically saying people would voluntarily associate. They would create something, they call it socialist, but ultimately it's just a different business structure. I mean, at the end of the day, that's fine. That's just capitalism.
It's a cooperative. It's not capitalism because there's no capitalist who's got control of production. Hence, it's not capitalism. It's socialism. It's
a semantic argument. I mean,
no, it's not a semantic argument. Co-ops.
Is someone going to own? Is there going to be a building that's owned by this group? Do they own? Like, there's a hospital, right? You're talking about a hospital, right? So if it's a hospital, then there's a group of people.
No. Talk about production, because if we're talking about talk like something like a factory, for example. The factory is owned by the workers in the factory. Or talk about an Uber where the taxi drivers actually own the Uber.
Well, let's stick with a factory. So if it's a socialist thing that you're talking about, basically what you're saying is all the people who work at the factory own the factory, and then they all get together and decide how to operate it, right? I mean, how is that any different from a corporation where every person who works at the corporation owns part of the stock of that corporation? So again, this is just semantic. But
it's a very good observation, and such a structure didn't exist in the time of Marx. And you could argue that maybe the reason in which we have shared ownership of companies is through people recognizing that
corporations didn't exist in the time of Marx. I don't
No,
think
no, no.
that's
What I'm saying is corporations own, like
Co-ops.
people owning shares in a company they worked for didn't exist.
The
You
co-op
have, you know,
idea was after Marx.
You
well,
wouldn't
okay,
have,
but
you know-
I'm just saying again, I think this is semantic because I don't know why in the past it would have been unfeasible for someone who worked at the factory. If there was a public stock exchange and there was stock in that company that was being sold, they could go and buy that stock and own a part of the company they worked for. I mean, this has happened all throughout US history.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
how do you approach building that structure where the people own the means of production, the community as a whole?
Yeah, it's called capitalism. We already have that.
No. Capitalism is the capitalist owning the means of production.
No, no. Well, okay, this is again semantic. What I'm saying is simply this, that I'm for a free society, meaning that any individual is free to buy anything they want with the money that they earn, right? And that they're able to keep the product of their labor and invest it how they want. That's what capitalism is. Now you can try to say that it's something about rich people owning things. I don't think that's true. I think if you just look at the definition, but again, we can throw out the word capitalism if you don't like that word.
Look at the dictionary definition of capitalism, and it's the capitalist.
I'll look it up right now. Let's just have a look.
Google it. Define capitalism.
An economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. So private owners can be anyone. Anyone can own stock in a company. You don't have to be some rich dude.
Now do me a favor.
Again, as long as that system is in place where you don't have like a two-tiered thing where like, oh, you're an oligarch so you can own property, but now you're a serf so you can't. I mean, of course, that would be terrible, but that's not what capitalism is. That's not how it works.
There's never been any kind of.
The argument would be that, because of the way in which getting the edge through, what's the word? Division of labor, for example, Adam Smith's division of labor, then eventually it centralizes. It always centralizes. You end up with massive corporations, massive companies, which control everything.
I don't know if that's true. I think that massive corporations, I mean, they can exist potentially, but I think a lot of times it's more that you have governments that help to entrench them in specific industries where, the corporation grows. Then they use the government to say, look, if you want to compete, you have to jump across, you have to, here's all these barriers to entry, right? And they set up barriers and they basically entrench themselves in their position, and that they're able to do that because they use the power and the violence and the coercion of the government, right? So if the government doesn't exist, then that corporation can only go to you with their product and say, hey, would you like to buy our product? And you as a consumer can say, yes, great, I'll buy it or not. And if it's a giant monopoly and they're providing good services and they're treating everyone well, then I really don't even care if a monopoly occurs, although I don't think that will happen outside of government coercion.
Let me give you an example. Okay, so this is just as a thought experiment, right? Just to try and so you've got two Amazons. You've got decentralized Amazon, okay, and you've got normal Amazon with Jeff Bezos. Decentralized Amazon producers, they get most of the value in which they put into the system. Most of the value they get back. There isn't a surplus which goes to Jeff Bezos so he can make his, lofty profits towards becoming the first trillionaire. I know it's completely hypothetical, silly. You're not going to have a functional co-op or decentralized system which could possibly work as well as Amazon because you need, authority, or you need a feudalist system in order to have such a successful company. But just hypothetically, these two companies exist: decentralized Amazon, normal Jeff Bezos Amazon. The products in both these companies cost exactly the same. You have the choice. You sit down at your computer. They have the exact same products delivered to you at the exact same speed, the exact same price. This is just a hypothetical idea. Which one are you going to shop in? You've got a choice. You can either shop in the normal Amazon with the Jeff Bezos, or you can shop in the decentralized Amazon where you know that most of the value is going to the producers of that Amazon. Which one are you going to pick?
Probably most people would pick the second option.
Of course, right. Decentralized Amazon, because people know and they recognize that.
But this is.
I want to make
nothing stopping you from doing that today, right? There's no reason why you couldn't set up a decentralized Amazon.
You can't make decisions.
So why doesn't it exist, right? Either it doesn't exist because it's not economically feasible, or because the current models work better than that. I don't know, but I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't try, and I think that's great. But again, that's all voluntarism. We should cut this, I think, because I think Thomas is saying we're going over.
We're going to go.
The last thing I just want to say is this. Look, I mean, I just think that like what you're getting at seems pretty reasonable to me. But to me, like when I hear the word socialism, I associate it with mass murder and government coercion and authoritarianism. So I would say that like you'll get a lot further with people if you just drop that term, because it's really loaded and
it's very important that
a very gross term.
if people want to think of that term in that way, because
how can you not think of it in that way? I mean, that's what it is.
Go to Google. Do me a favor. Go to Google. Define socialism. Like we did for capitalism. Just the last thing before we finish.
Oh my God. All right. I mean,
go on.
It's going to be something gross.
Go on. Define socialism.
Let's see.
You're muted, Tom. Tom, you're muted.
A political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole.
Nothing about tax. Nothing about.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough, but you know, when you have every every example in history is a coercive authoritarian nightmare, it's just a term that you might be better off just leaving behind. That's all I'm saying, you know. Because I'm all about voluntarism and people, you know, associating how they want. If you want to set up a collective.
Every example in history has been a failure. Social Security in the United States works fine. The problem was
it's a giant failure. It's a Ponzi scheme that's bankrupt. What are you talking about?
People on the street dying. It's bankrupt because the government, the politicians stole the money. Al Gore in the year 2000 wanted to put the money in a lock box. They laughed at him. You know what happened? They stole the money. It's gone now. It was.
I know.
It was.
But that's my point.
They stole the money. No, it solved the problem. There's not old people dying on the street right now because of poverty. That's what social.
I don't think there were old people dying on the street.
There were. Go back and read about the Great Depression. Go back and read about FDR. Go back and read about the WPA.
Well, hold on. Actually, that's not even true because there's a lot of homelessness. There's a lot of homelessness in.
Yes, there's
a lot of homelessness in San Francisco, LA. We've got homelessness in New York. We got
the solutions. We've funded for the old people. Social Security.
Thomas, we've got thousands of people, many of them old, on the street in the U.S. dying of starvation and living in tents.
And
basically,
have universal basic income. We could increase taxes on the Google companies that are taking our data, as Andrew Yang said.
Oh my God, dude! All right, let's just move on. I can't. I don't know.
Social Security is universal basic income for old people. It's socialism, and it works so good that everyone who has it loves it. The same thing with Medicare. It's socialized medicine. And again, in these other countries, there are fringe cases. If you have an obscure kind of cancer, it's difficult to get treatment.
All this, I mean,
if you have any kind of cancer in the US, you go bankrupt and you wipe out your whole family. So what's worse, financial destruction or minor problems for obscure diseases? Financial destruction is worse. We live in a complicated system where pre-treating diseases, giving people the chance to do things before they get the disease,
Thomas, if all this stuff works so well,
increases the whole society. Look at
Thomas, if this all works so well, then why are there so many homeless people on the streets of LA, San Francisco, New York City, et cetera?
Supply and demand. The weather is fantastic.
Right, the government's no. I'm just saying it.
Homeless people in Minnesota when it's freezing cold on the streets of London. Why are there so few homeless people? Oh, it's the weather. It's the weather.
Look, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. Pick the city. My point is that you're trying to say that these systems work. And what I'm telling you is that they can't work because it's built on theft and it's built on coercion and it's built on, giving a small group of people a ton of economic power and expecting that they're not going to abuse that and that they're going to use it effectively and that the pricing systems are going to work. The free market is the solution to all of our problems. And I believe that that is very true.
Is it theft
if
when
you
I
take
drive
the
on
time
the
to look at
road?
it.
I drive on the roads without paying, and it's theft. I use the roads for my businesses. My business is right there on the street and gets mail, and the mailman walks on the road.
There's no
They're
reason you
interconnected. Everything is connected, and we can try to
you
play
can
the
have toll
winner take
roads.
all
That's very
capitalist game,
simple.
and I'm gonna win, you're gonna lose, and I have health care and you don't have health care, and I'm gonna get my drugs cheaper, prescription drugs. We're all going to work better if we work together. That's what this coronavirus is proving.
This is
Proving that we're all connected, and if the lowest guy who works
this
at
is the
McDonald's doesn't
utopianism of socialism.
not
That is
utopianism,
total
it's real.
nonsense.
It's
I
real.
mean, it's not. You could argue this is more Nash and people working together to try and find sort of equilibrium. That working together is necessary.
It's a win-win relationship.
Yes, if it all worked as you claim or wish it did, that would be great. But it's a utopian idea that has proven to not work. It's proven to centralize power in the hands of criminals who use it to do terrible things. It is
When you
the
say
money
this,
that is taxed in this country does not help people. It's used to build bombs, to send people around the world and spreading warfare and destruction. It's just it's really sad.
Navies to open new markets, and they're not using their navies to project power on the world. The capitalists are doing nothing.
I will say that this is actually, it may sound like we're having a terrible like late night rant, annoying late night rant, which should be stopped immediately. But actually, this is probably quite important because, our economies are crashing. We have got this incredible, horrible virus, which is going to have more of an impact on the current way in which we produce things. Like, people will question the current way in which we produce things if we have like a depression and a recession, all these other things. And there will be questions around maybe there's other ways of producing things. Now, my worry would be, like Robert was saying, that more power goes to states and more power goes to government. There's a lot of lefties and there are a lot of like state socialisty types who think that you can just give. I've worked for state, I've worked for government. They're incredibly inefficient. They're terrible. They're awful. And I don't want that side of the left to kind of get more power. And there will be a point where more and more people are going to start talking and questioning the way in which we produce things, and maybe we could produce things differently. And that is going to happen directly because of this virus and the measures which are being taken. And who knows what the answers are. I don't think anyone should profess to know what the answers are, but I think the reason in which we've fallen into this debate is because it's probably the sort of debate a lot of people are going to be having in the next in the coming months. They're going to be questioning the whole way in which our society is structured, which they probably should do, and maybe they'll find some good synthesis. And
I heard Ben, you are an enigma. I really am struggling to understand you, because you speak of socialism in a positive light, but you also claim you don't want the leftists in your country or in any country to gain more power.
I don't want.
So how does this whole thing work out? I just don't get it.
There are a lot of people who just think that if you just give power to states, they can make a whole bunch of decisions, or give power to government and they'll parent you, they'll make a whole bunch of good decisions. And it just doesn't work like that.
Well, that's what Thomas is advocating for, basically. We need to give more money, universal income, all this stuff.
Priorities. You get to set the priorities. When you have a corporation, your only priority is your responsibility to make profits for your shareholders. Destroy the forest, profits for the shareholders. Murder the village, profits for the shareholders. At the government level, when we originally chartered corporations such as the Dutch East India Corporation, which was the very first corporation, it was chartered for the good of the state to open a trade route to India so that Amsterdam and the Netherlands would be improved by access to trade and new goods. We can say that with corporations like prescription drugs. You can't gouge people. Like the coronavirus vaccine, you have to give it for free. You have to, make less profit on it. We have the scale where the drug is, under copyright for a little while, then it goes out of copyright, becomes a generic drug. These are controls we've put on systems. The main thing that we have to get down here is that it's not unrestricted capitalism versus socialism. The true answer is in the middle, with a controlled version of capitalism, with a controlled version of socialism, where we do check against those Politburos and those gangs of power and those strong men that take control of these systems. And basically what's happened is, yes, most of the socialist or communist experience have been taken over by strong men, by groups of power, such as the Chinese ruling group that rules their government. They're not true experiments in this, but again, they lived in an unsafe world where the rest of the world was working against them. And it's never going to be a safe world. It's never going to be a vacuum. All of these programs we try to put down as if people were moral, as if they were this, as if they were that. We can't have them in a vacuum. We need something strong, something that'll survive, like Bitcoin, as Andrea said, sewer rat and the bubble boy. And Bitcoin's a sewer rat. It's for anything. But I want to talk to Dan. Anything going on with Dan?
Oh yeah, how's it going?
Oh, Dan, you're here. Cool.
Oh yeah, I did try and sneak in, but I wasn't going to try and put my foot in the door too much. I was actually a really good conversation. I'm not really that knowledgeable in terms of like socialists and capitalists and stuff, but I must admit that I do think that just that the one thing that we're seeing at the moment is that like the extremes are getting all the media. So you don't have like right, left, moderates anymore. You literally just have like everyone's a Nazi or everyone's a snowflake, and that polarization and isn't good for anyone really. I like to try and kind of dip my toes into lots of different ideas and then come up with a happy medium, because often when you believe so passionately about something, you can't see the negatives in it. You can't see the evidence right in front of your face. We can also come to that when we believe in something so much. So yeah, like chill out, people. Fuck. Hopefully we don't all kill each other and the world's not going to end. And if so, anyway, like the quarantine was amazing so far, because I've been learning some more Python and bash and stuff now. I've been curling one out with some curl and some APIs and some gets and ding dong and this and that, and it's been really good actually. Yeah, just being able to kind of build and learn. So build and learn, guys. If you're going to be quarantined, do something cool, do something useful, even if it has no particular use. If you want to check out what I'm doing, look at GitHub/Cryptopoly, and it's just I've basically put there's a few repositories in there. And one of them, I'm going to do it for Bitcoin, but essentially it's like a menu for Bitcoin RPC calls, but on the terminal. And so I've done it for Ocean, which is a fork of Elements by Commerce so it's a side chain, but it's the same principle essentially. But it's got a nice little menu, and it will index all the commands. So it will tell you pick number 114 to list unspent transactions, rather than having to type it in and stuff. So I'm just doing some random crap. It may not be useful to anyone, but yeah, that was a big waffle, wasn't it? I suppose I haven't talked for a while, so it's really difficult to get out.
Dan reminds me of a great quote where they said, "Idealists believe in ideals, but pragmatists believe in what works." So let's move on to the exit question. How long do you think the world will be impacted by coronavirus? 1 year, 3 years, or longer? Ben from Wales.
Forever, man. It's a game changer. The world's going to change. People are going to change after it. It's a huge. We're just starting. It's just ramping up. It's terrifying. So yeah, for forever, we're going to be impacted forever.
Robert Allen.
6 months.
6 months, done. All right, Dan, Eve, crypto.
Robert's answer.
I'm with Trump, and I think it's a hoax. And I'm going to build myself a steam-powered rocket so that I can fly up to the Earth, so I can see all the coronas virusing, and and then I'll prove everybody wrong.
Only a steam-powered rocket can save you. I agree with Ben. We're forever changed. It's going to change all of our societies. It's epic, world changing, but we'll forget about it in a few years anyway. We'll say, "Oh, why do you do that with your hand washing or whatever?" And don't you remember the coronavirus? And they'll say, "What do you mean, the coronavirus? I don't remember that." But yeah, you need to use the seashells.
Yeah, maybe that's we're gonna because all these films are getting so good at predicting the random futures that we have. Maybe that's it. Maybe you need 3 seashells, and then you're that you're immune to coronavirus. So that's you just go
I tried to think about how that would work. So one of them would clean you, the other one would dry you, and then the other one would flush.
Happy ending.
Yeah, but then maybe a happy ending. The fourth.
Just for people that don't know what they're talking about, we're talking about I think it's a 1991 classic Demolition Man, might be 95, with Sylvester Stallone and Sandra Bullock and Dennis Leary, and it's this great
That's very good.
story where
They-
they freeze a police. Well, they freeze a criminal for some reason, not a good idea. Then they freeze a police officer just because he was framed. And then they get to the future. They unfreeze the criminal. They unfreeze the police officer, and they have a great battle all over a beautiful futuristic Los Angeles where there's no more cursing. Every time you curse, a little machine beeps, which as a kid I thought was the greatest.
Spartan, you are fined 1 ticket for immoral.
That's exactly right. And there's also a great thing about how no one touches each other anymore. There's no sexual content. They use this kind of virtual reality thing to have sex. At the time, seemed very futuristic. Now, seems like we're right there, right? We're right on the edge of this. In addition, they predicted that in the future, all restaurants will be Taco Bell.
that is like a commie Stalinist utopia. Like actually, I mean, what they would dream to be. It's a beautiful functioning society, but then actually, all the people who want to be creative and thinkers and think for themselves and do messed up things like run around naked, like they all just live in the sewers and they're not allowed to be integrated into the rest of society. So actually, it is a great film, really. Yeah,
it's a really good vehicle too for Dennis Leary's stand-up. He kind of represents the right-wing male meat-eating view. I have the kind of a libertarian, even really. He has the right to smoke cigarettes, the right to eat meat, the right to do what he wants to do. Whereas this controlling society says, no, you are a part of our society. You need to make money for our society. We need to keep you healthy. We need to educate you. We need to track you. And I think this is really what we're talking about. This big argument, this debate, this discussion we had today has to do with that spectrum and where you are. And if you think we should be more productive or less productive, or if that's too Orwellian, or if Orwell's even a bad thing, or if this is good.
At the end, Sliced Alone, he says to Leary, he's like, you need to get a lot cleaner. And then he says to the other guy, you need to get a little bit dirtier. And then that's how they're going to now form their new society. Then he just walks off with the girl with Sandra Bullock. So maybe that's what we need to do.
There it is, pragmatism, bringing the two ideas, the two schools of thought together. I think that's really the answer, and it's it's a good compromise. It satisfies no one, right? Everyone loses a little bit, but we come together. Let's move on to predictions or story of the week. Ben, are you ready with a prediction or a story of the week?
No, it's just going to get more gnarly. Like everything's the exponential growth. Keep checking out those numbers, those Corona numbers. We did 50,000, I think, this week. We broke 100,000 just before the show last week. It's going to be, I know, 300,000 by the time we do the show next week. So more people are going to get sick, more people are going to die. I just hope that it's done in a controlled way where health services are able to function properly, and we're able to, I don't know, come with a freaking cure. It's not going to happen, but stuff's going to get more scary. So sorry.
Robert Allen, tell me something positive. More people are going to die, but the Disney Mulan remake is going to be great. We need something to look forward to.
What's going to happen this next week? I mean, I can't predict the future. I really don't know. I think Bitcoin will probably recover some, I hope. And yeah, I mean, I would just want to echo Mr. Crypto Raptor in saying that, I mean, use this time if you are quarantined or self-quarantined or whatever, learn some coding or, jump into something of interest that's going to help you to hopefully further your life and improve things and try to contribute to Bitcoin in whatever way you can. I think, Bitcoin is an interesting experiment. That's definitely not a traditional corporation. It's definitely not really anything that we've seen before. And we need more and more people piling in, doing what you can. I spoke with a lady today, convinced her to buy a little bit of Bitcoin. I said, I can't promise you it's not going to drop more, but this is right after the second biggest one-day drop in history for Bitcoin. So it's probably a decent time to get a little bit if you don't have any. So I'm always encouraging people to diversify, hold some Bitcoin. Jump in, do your part. We're going to make this happen.
All right, Dan, Eve, prediction or story of the week.
Okay, so prediction is that I think we've all over exaggerated slightly, and the numbers will hopefully drop off. And that's really optimistic me talking, because I've gone more of a downer as the show's gone on. Like I'm like, oh my god, the world. I'm kind of like Chicken Licken. The world does seem to be ending. Bitcoin has shit the bed. It could shit the bed further. I think the thing that concerns me is that, and I know I'm going to try and go back into waffle mode again, is that you know, Bitcoin, I think people realize that it relies on an infrastructure that if we go into some sort of meltdown viral thing, you know, that's the reason why it dropped. I think there's a lot of, you know, fear over if we do isolate everywhere and, you know, the security could be compromised. So there's a lot of general fear, but there's all us hodlers that won't be selling anytime, anywhere in the near future. So just hodl type people. In the meantime, do something cool. I predict that loads of you guys are going to go and build something cool and just do something constructive. Learn about Bitcoin. I think with Traven the other day, Traven Keith the other day had a Bitcoin pull request. I think I'm pretty sure I saw something about that. So, you know, do whatever you can. Like, yeah, just contribute.
Also try and because obviously, like now we're all at home and everyone's sat at home, and they're going to be filling those spaces on the internet, which people are, I don't know, disabled people are likely to go to. I suppose maybe I don't know, maybe. You know, I can imagine there'd be a resurgence in something like Second Life or something, or I don't know, Minecraft servers or whatever. And it'd be so cool if we can get more Bitcoin implementation into that. So many developers out there, if they can integrate Bitcoin into some of those systems, which people are probably going to be spending more time on, that'd be great.
I would like to see a Bitcoin Second Life or a Bitcoin Minecraft. There's been a big movement for Bitcoin virtual reality, and that's great. But what if you don't own an expensive virtual reality headset like I don't happen to own one? So I don't feel very welcome in these virtual reality conferences. It's easy to say, hey, we're switching to virtual, but maybe let's try it where you can just use a monitor and a keyboard. We all seem to have one of those.
You can use Google Cardboard, and then there's a few apps that I had an app that so it was normal Google Cardboard, and I used my phone to play like games that are on the Oculus Rift. So it can be done on the cheap.
If we can get in the chat, they just have to tell me if I can join the VR chat or whatever it is. But Robert, we kind of have 5 minutes here left at the end. Maybe if you want to give like a 2-minute version of your idea, and then we'll each give like a little 30-second response. Maybe we can have you on a full show in the future to discuss this more. But Robert's got an idea about the Lightning Network he wants to share with these guys. So go ahead, Robert.
Thanks, Thomas. Cool. So I set up a little Raspberry Pi node a couple months back using my node, which is a great open source software setup to get that going pretty easily. So anyone who's interested in Lightning, I definitely recommend using that. But anyway, as I got set up and started playing around a bit, started realizing that it's not exactly easy to route payments. There are quite a few times where you'll try to use Lightning and you won't actually be able to find a route to route a payment, which is pretty frustrating, especially if you're used to Bitcoin, because it always works. And so that got me thinking and researching, and just, you know, I just have been, I guess, going on this for a while. So the idea is basically, it's called Superbolt. It's a proposal that I'm working on that would ultimately be a bolt, B-O-L-T, capital B, capital O, capital L, capital T, which is, you know, how you introduce improvements to Lightning Network protocol, so similar to the BIPs with Bitcoin. And anyway, this proposal is still very early stage, but the basic idea is that I think it would be advantageous to have essentially like a subset network, Lightning Network, that would have some additional requirements for participants to be part of this network, the Superbolt network. Basically, these requirements would be minimum liquidity per channel, minimum uptime, which would be verified, self-attested by each node using open timestamps and hashing that into the Bitcoin blockchain. And then also some software to automate rebalancing using circular payments, which is a way to use to rebalance your channels without using on-chain transactions, which is pretty cool. And there's a few other pieces to the proposal. You can check it out. It's on GitHub /Robert William Allen /Superbolt. So it's, you know, like I said, early stage, but I've gotten some feedback so far from a few people. And, you know, the impetus, the reason I think this would be worth considering is that if we have liquidity and uptime and a few of these other things in place, we would effectively have a network that we could then guarantee, say, a couple $100 perhaps worth of liquidity in either direction in and out of this subset of Lightning Network which could then be used to perhaps onboard merchants. I'd love to see something kind of like BitInstant, which was shut down, but where you could go into a 7-Eleven or a convenience store and give them $50 and walk out with some Lightning Bitcoin in a wallet. And so, but to get there, I think we have to have a user experience that is better and where payments are basically guaranteed because we have a network that's more professionally managed. So that's the basic proposal.
All right, let's go to Dan. Eve, quick response. What do you think of Robert's Bolt idea?
I think it's cool because anything that improves usability on the Lightning Network at the moment. I mean, there's a lot of good apps out there. Like I do like the Zap wallet. There's obviously shout out to Noddle for making Lightning hardware so that you can run your Zap wallet, your Samurai, and and run your full node. But the biggest barrier, I think, is, and especially coming from like a business analyst background, in terms, I used to work a lot on usability and user experience, and there are a lot of really good wallets and stuff out there, but at the same time, it's still very scary for people, and it's finding that kind of sweet spot between giving people enough information so that they can make informed decisions and removing the options from people's field of vision and control that would ultimately make them lose their Bitcoin. And there's loads of things that you can think of, from anything from address checks and all sorts. But you can go down to the nth degree depending on, and I think that's the good thing about Bitcoin, is depending on what people's skill level is. You can choose a hardcore wallet where you can fiddle with things. You can choose a wallet where it's just literally click and send. But I think certainly for Lightning Network, I think any advancements at the moment, are really welcome. So I'll check it out. Thanks very much.
Awesome.
Ben from Wales, you work on a lot of Lightning projects. What do you think of the idea?
Yeah, I mean, as it makes sense that there would be a node federation, like a pool of nodes, which you could access for like a higher fee, and then you would be able to route high liquidity purchases or whatever through. But I suppose ultimately, the point is that we shouldn't need it in the Lightning Network in order, so you wouldn't have that experience of spinning up a node and then struggling to route payments. So as a sort of temporary measure, and as a way of providing higher liquidity for some routing, then it sounds cool. It sort of sounds like one of those ideas which you can tell is a good idea because it's kind of an obvious idea, oh yeah, why has anyone else thought of this thing? So it's a very, I like it. It's a very clean and sounds like an obviously good idea. I do hope that eventually, when we have payment splitting and things, and when a lot of this stuff is more automated, and we're able to get to a point where we wouldn't need such a an extra a pool or federation of nodes. I mean, you could have multiple pools and federations of nodes, I suppose, which are working together and all share a rule set using open timestamps. It's a cool idea. It's a good idea. And it's a pioneering idea, and I'm sure other ideas will kind of spin off it for other types of node pools, which could perform other functions as well. So I mean, experimentation is always welcome, and I look forward to reading the Bolt. Sounds cool.
Cool. Thank you. And yeah, just I guess caveat is this is again early stage. This is definitely not a Bolt that's ready to be submitted. It's more this is the high level overview of what I'm trying to achieve, and here's some of the key pieces and what I'm envisioning. But I mean, this is really early, and I also need help because I've done some programming, but I'm at the sort of application developer level. I'm definitely not experienced Golang coder, for example, and it would probably need to be implemented in Go. Because that would, I imagine that'd be the easiest way to try to do this, at least the first implementation. So I've started to learn Go. I'm going to try to take a whack at it, but it's going to be a big challenge. So bottom line is, if you guys know anyone you can connect me with who's more of a protocol type engineer, I would be indebted. But yeah, thank you. These comments are really encouraging, and I keep getting, generally speaking, mostly positive input. I've heard from a few of the Lightning Network, kind of some of the bigger devs, and they have also seemed to be, generally speaking, in favor. So I'm going to keep working on it. So let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear feedback. once you read it.
Well, and I agree with Ben. This is something that might not be needed later on in the Lightning Network, but something that's needed early, kind of like scaffolding. We put
Sure.
this up for a little while, we use this for a little while, and then later on, the network just functions normally. And you're like, why would we need that? Well, we needed it in the beginning because, like Robert was saying, if you're having trouble routing your Lightning payments, if you want to have a smooth user experience, and you could route them into this temporary zone of good Lightning, and then later on, the whole network's good Lightning. I think it has to do a lot of what we were talking about today with not being idealistic in either way, decentralization, centralization, but being pragmatic in the middle, where for a little while we centralize. Later on, we decentralize. Our values are still good. Our goals are still the same, but we're willing to do what's necessary, what's pragmatic to get to our goal. So that's what
and I do think as well that like just the concept of wrapping nodes up together could be really interesting. So I've always for ages, I've been trying to think of how you would make a decentralized custodian. So you would have, a custodian solution like an open node, except open node would actually hold the funds. The funds are held by a federation of nodes. And then if, the rules are such that a percentage of those nodes won't leave with funds, so there'll always be enough funds to cover the funds which the person who's using the custodian thing puts in. And then those nodes for running that service could receive some sort of interest as a, know that not one person is one company is going to run away with your money. So I mean that's
a cool idea.
Yeah, stringing those together.
That actually could potentially dovetail pretty well with the Superbolt idea as a maybe an add-on or an additional feature. So that's a really cool idea. I like that.
Do it, man. Make it. I want one. I want it to exist.
Robert,
cool. Well, I'll try to get your input on that piece in particular. I think that would probably be more down the road because I think it would be pretty complex to build. I think to do that in a way that it's safe, but I think that's a really cool idea.
So Robert, one more time, where can people check this out on GitHub? And they can also contact you on Twitter. Just let them know. Oh,
sure. Yeah. So Satoshi Sound, I think I'll actually just tweet it out today. So that'll be the easiest way. So it's at Satoshi Sound, like, the sound of music is my Twitter handle. And it's GitHub/Robert William Allen/Superbolt. But I will, I'll tweet it out here after we hang up. So.
All right. And we're going to head towards the end of the show. I just wanted to show the fundraiser one more time. As always, you can donate to the World Crypto Network. We're trying to raise $1 million in Bitcoin. It's been pretty fun to actually just watch the upper left-hand corner of this fundraiser. Originally, it was around 115 Bitcoin. I think at the beginning of the show, it was 195 Bitcoin. Now it's a smooth 177 and a lot of sevens Bitcoin. So 10, 20 bucks, anything helps. Thanks for your support. Also, thanks for giving us a thumbs up and a share. That really helps new people find the show. And we'll be back again trying to do some more call-in shows, keeping up with the price of Bitcoin. Fortunately, the Dow Jones Industrial Average will be closed this weekend, so we have to take some time off there. But as you guys know, the Bitcoin market never closes, and neither do we at the World Crypto Network. So be sure to check us out. Subscribe down below. Hit the bell for notifications. We've got new interviews coming in from the Lightning Conference and HCPP almost every day here. And until next time, bye-bye.